Well, I appreciate you setting aside some time to talk to me. It's been a while since we've had
Yeah.
a conversation and everything, and a lot's happened since way back when. An Olympiad has come and gone, and the dream still burns for you, I see.
Yeah, so I remember last time I was still climbing up through the Devo circuit trying to get my bearings and a lot of runs later, a lot of crashes and a little bit of traveling and I'm starting to kind of get my feet under me a little bit more and I've been being more competitive. So it's been really nice to see that progression over the years.
Mhm. Talk a little bit about that progression because you didn't, you came to this sport late in terms of skeleton and bobsled. You came to it late, and when you come in late, you have to work a little bit harder to just catch up. How has, how, talk a little bit about that process of coming in late. You show some athletic acumen. You go through the programming that gets you to this point, but it could have been, I guess, a different story if you hadn't had some stick to itiveness.
Right. Yeah, so with the US program, the recruitment is a little bit different than other countries. Because we're a little bit delayed, we're the target is usually collegiate athletes or athletes that have performed at a relatively high level. So they have like the athletic base already and a nice solid foundation, a lot of power and explosive sports. And so my background is track and field, specifically the heptathlon, specifically the hurdles. So when I did come out for the combine, I showed an aptitude for a bit of power inclusivity, and then when it translated to pushing an actual sled on the rails, the hurdle motor pattern that I built foundation for actually translated very well. Just being in an awkward position, getting my hips to come through, getting my knee drive. So it was really beneficial to me to start coming in with that as my ace up my sleeve, if that makes sense. But driving is a whole other beast. So I can push lights out all day long, but driving takes a lot of studying, a lot of hours of trying to understand the craft. And fortunately for me, like I came in with some teammates that had different skill sets than me that actually could take a track apart and look at it from a different perspective. And working together with some of those athletes has really helped expedite my learning and progression in the sport. Naturally, there's not really a way to replicate this, so you have to do a trial and error. So you're taking these runs at 70 plus miles an hour, and you're taking some wall ups down the track. So a lot of it is learning on the fly. Sometimes you're flying, and then you get some air time, but eventually you start to put pieces together. And when it's time to race, you kind of try to put it all together and minimize the damage, or just minimize the guesswork by just trying to execute and being as simple as possible. So it's been a long journey of trying to simplify a lot of things.
Mm. When you talk about driving and catching air, uh, that's got to be scary. When did you get over that? Or in this sport, is that something you just never really get accustomed to and you just accept it for what it is and just go for the ride?
Yeah, sometimes you're just going so fast, you make a mistake and it's just gonna happen. It's happening too quickly to kind of react. Other times the fear is so built up that you just know, and so it's kind of like not quite a car wreck, but you know it's going to happen, so you brace. So it can make it a little bit more challenging to react in that kind of situation. But there's definitely a healthy fear. So every run you take, you can be very well versed in that track. There's different things that can happen. There's different things that could pop up that you don't know about. So the biggest thing is remaining calm through the whole thing. Easier said than done, but for sure, there's always that slight bit of something, and like I just call it the butterflies because it could be really good because you're alert, but it could also be bad because you have that slight anticipation of like what if. So, I wish I could say they go away, but every time I step to the block, there is that flutter slightly in your stomach that you feel something that could pop up in any moment.
Obviously, you learned to manage it because you've had growing success over the years. And in just looking over this past season, it's obviously been your most successful ever. 2024, fifth in the world in the team competition. I guess it's a mixed team. So you finished fifth in, on the planet. That's pretty good. Uh, and then, I read somewhere else where you did something that no U.S. Athlete had done in 8 years in winning on the World Cup tour, where you won the finale at Lake Placid. The last time that had happened was 2016, the year you just happened to graduate Queen's University. So, talk a little bit about breaking through in just in this past year when it comes to your particular sport and doing something that no American had done in 8 years. And how does that make you feel in terms of the progression and pointing towards the Olympics now?
Um, I would have to say, like, this season was so special for me in the sense that I had worked so hard just to fight for the opportunity. And I don't think there was so much a doubt of what my potential could be, but there were certain things in place, like protocol and criteria, where there has to be certain metrics met, there has to be certain, protocols in place. And so I was just waiting for my moment. And it's been really tough being so close to be able to like be an alternate to certain situations. Like if there was a vacancy, I could potentially get moved up, but if it's filled, then I can't. So finally coming out this season, where I had earned my space, there was no up for debate about did I qualify fairly? Did I earned it flat out. And to finally have the opportunity, I was able to just show what I could do. And I think that was really special because now the people who didn't take me seriously before took me seriously. There's a bit of more respect that comes my way. There's some more recognition, and to end the season with the finale in my home track, there was a lot of stress that was attached to that race. I kind of went in originally kind of just like, man, it's the last race. I was really chill. But then this conversation, like, hey, there's a lot of people here that are gonna be watching, like sponsors, people who are really involved with our team. So then it's kind of that the butterflies start to come in a little more. And it's like, hey, there's more added stress. And then it's just like my training was not going well. There's certain concepts I wasn't getting. And it's just sometimes at your home track, you overcomplicate something that's supposed to be really simple. So eventually, like for me, it just came to just flattening out and just like letting it all go. And when I got to the line, the moment I put my helmet on the crown of my head, everything stops. I don't hear anything else. I zone out. I just see my coach. I hear him counting down for me, and then everything else doesn't matter. So to finally get in the track and do what I was, training to do this whole time allowed me to have fun in that moment. The minute of going about 70 plus miles an hour and then do it again. And when I actually got to the bottom, I thought I threw it away because I made a very, very critical mistake in the middle of the track and I thought I bled the timeout, but I just managed to hold on to the lead by 200 of a second. And the emotions just poured out. I was in tears. I was trying not to show it on camera because I didn't want to be like that. But it was just so overwhelming to finally make that achievement. I didn't know it was 8 years since. I just knew that I finally, hit the metric to bump me up in like the rankings for within my team and to qualify for a little bit more support. But when I heard it, it kind of just made it like all come together that like I'm on the right path. I'm progressing at a great rate. The projection is looking really good for me, and the support that I've been asking for and searching for and what I'm begging for, I'm finally getting it. And it's been really validating that it's not been in vain. Everything that I've been doing up to this point has been to build me up for this moment and then beyond. So I'm really excited of how my progression is going, and I'm excited for the next season.
And it's not like you backed into it. You were on the podium for 4 out of the 5 races that you competed in. So it's not like you just snuck up on folks. It was just a matter of at some point there's going to be a win. And there it was.
Yeah.
Did you have that same feeling that just keep hammering away? One of these days it's going to break through?
Um, I would have to say the La Plan, which is the first race I was in, which is World Cup race number 2 of the season, like that was a complete shock. It was I'd never been there before. I was getting just wrecked throughout training. I was getting ate up by the walls, and I conceptually was missing certain key components. And I was talking to my coach and working with him on different things. And when that race can't pan through, and I was bumping up, and I was like, it didn't register in that moment when they're like, hey, here's your top 3 and you have a silver. And I was like, oh man, like this is actually possible. And I think that carried a lot of momentum into the season for me to give myself the credit that I can compete with these girls that are really high up in ranking, that are some of the best athletes in the world that, that are just, been training and competing for a long time. And I'm a new face in the World Cup, but I've been around for the past 7 seasons. And it was really cool to see that I can hold my own against them. And there's a lot of respect on the tour for all the girls, to them and from them. And it's been really nice to be in that environment where it's just really competitive.
And you talked about uh, getting that respect. And I know when we originally talked way back when, that was part of the hurdles that you had to go through, because we talked about it. It's like, well, to look at you, there aren't a whole lot of sisters on the tour. So it's like, okay, yeah, she's standing out. And, that's just the way it is. Have things changed? And what does winning in Lake Placid do for you in terms of the things that you talked about as far as the sponsorships, the respect, the rankings, no doubt about it, but all the things that go into it's not so much of something that you've never seen before or the sport hasn't seen before. This is a legitimate racer now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the beginning it's kind of one of those like, is she going to stick around? And for a brief moment when I was struggling a lot, it was a really bad question. But once I got over that hurdle, I committed to it because I genuinely enjoy the sport, but I didn't want this like the politics, the animosity that I was facing, and the negativity to be the deciding factor. I wanted to leave on my terms, and my terms say keep going. So generally with the progression I've had over the years, the results I've gotten, I have earned the respect of a lot of my competitors and peers and just people in general who are learning more about the sport. And I think what's really helped is this great wave right now highlighting women's sports. And so sometimes I'll get a random feature on a Google search, someone tag me in it, or it'll be on TikTok and I have a hashtag that's attached to me. So there's an increased visibility. And I think with that, just because I'm a little more active on social media with the sport, I do get seen more. And I think it kind of stirs the pot as far as like generating more interest because there are more athletes coming from a diverse backgrounds coming to winter sports from backgrounds that are not traditional for that recruitment. And I think it's starting to open the doors for other people to see that as an opportunity. Like, oh, you do have a legitimate shot if you want to. It doesn't have to be like exclusive anymore. Like if you would like to give it a shot, by all means come out and try. But I think seeing more diversity is helping people break through that barrier of whether or not you belong in that area or not. But it provides the space for people who actually do have a seat at the table to even have the discussion fairly versus being pushed off abruptly just because you don't fit the bill.
Yeah, and I would imagine, especially since you're talking about the non-traditional. So if you grew up with bobsledding and skeleton, it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's second nature. But you're talking about track and field, which is like, okay, that has nothing to do with ice unless you're trying to ice down something that's sore. Uh, with that background with track and field, the translation to this particular sport, obviously you have to have explosion in order to do this well. You got to get off to a good start. Uh, what else from that track and field background helps you in this particular sport?
So funny enough, the heptathlon has been a very good tool in my arsenal, because the nature of the heptathlon, or just multis in general, is it's a lot of events in a 2 day period. So I've learned compartmentalization. So in two ways. So when I'm taking a run down the track is a mile or so long. There's 16 to 20 curves. I can't think about a mistake I made in curve 2 because I'm already in curve 8. So when the mistake is done, scrap it, move on, and try to, you micromanage to a certain extent. But there's a balancing act of doing too much correction is actually slowing you down because you're cutting more ice versus just letting it go and kind of suggesting it to be better set up for the next curve. And then eventually, hopefully it'll, work itself out. So in that regard, it's helped me not compound mistakes in the track, which is going to bleed time. And then on a tour itself, there's on a World Cup circuit and most development circuits as well. There's 8 races, so we go to one location a week. So we have 6 training runs, then we race, and then we go to the next location, and then 6 training runs, race, go to the next location. So if I get 6 runs to train at Lake Placid, and then I have 2 runs to race in, to like first heat, second heat, and whatever happens. Next week I'm in Sigulda potentially, which is in Latvia. I can't think about the mistakes I made in Lake Placid. I have to get ready for Sigulda. So there's a time and a place for all these concerns or these studying moments and these things of like, review, these periods of review, but it has to be within that right window of time. Otherwise it affects the next stop or the next location, and then it compromises your progression that training window. So being a multi actually has been my best tool for me, just because it's taught me how to let things go at the appropriate time. Like you do the best you can with what you have. It's not always going to be ideal. Sometimes you look upon something, sometimes you struggle, but at the end of the day, you have to keep moving forward. You can't keep thinking backwards. You can't hold on to stuff, and that's been a really great thing for me as far as like being able to progress at the rate I've been progressing at.
So in other words, you're not as good as your last run, you're as good as your next one.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, that makes sense. In terms of looking ahead, and I know as an athlete, you're always saying, well, one day at a time, on and on. But the rest of us don't look at things that way. The rest of us are going to take the longer view in terms of, well, it's 2024. A lot of people have their attention trained towards Paris and the Summer Olympics. But the Winter Games aren't that far away. 2026 is right around the corner. Uh, how much of that do you focus on versus one race at a time?
So it's funny you said that. I actually look at things in a quad. So for me, if I take a step back and look at the calendar, so between the Beijing to Italy, that's 4 years, and there's 8 races a year at the World Cup level. So that's 32 World Cups. So the first year out of the quad, I only got one World Cup. So I'm already down 7 from that first year. So from there, I'm like, okay, well, this means I only have this many World Cups leading to the Olympic season, and that means I only have this many world championships to qualify for. So I look at it as far as like how many opportunities do I have at that level, and then between there, like how many runs do I get? So there's a certain amount of runs I have in mind that I want per season, and based on the schedule that I'm given and I have to accommodate to, sometimes I'll meet that metric, sometimes I won't. So for me, I have a nice bird's eye view of everything, so I can see, okay, like I got runs here, I got the quantity I needed here, but I missed it over here, so I need to make it up over here. So I do shift things around to try to make sure I meet the metrics I'm trying to hit, or at least within tolerance of like a certain amount. Because realistically, there's so little ice time available. It all matters. It all adds up. So in the summertime, obviously, there's nothing iced up. There's no ice canal I can go slide at. There's nothing I can really simulate it. So the best I can do is lay on a sled or lay on my bed and pretend. So I do like a mind run. So I'll just sit down, or lay down my chest, close my eyes, and go through a track. Other times I'll watch World Cup videos on YouTube or pre-recordings and watch runs and then kind of analyze it that way with a coach. But once it's the season, it's go time. We have to try to get these runs in and as effectively as possible, because it all costs money, unfortunately. So it adds up very quickly. But you want to try to get the most out of it. So that means studying ahead of time. So when you do arrive, you're not wasting time by trying to get familiar with the track. You already know what's going on. You're just trying to finesse it at that point, so that you can prepare for the training runs, which will then lead to racing. So I would love to say that I'm very easygoing with the scheduling, but I do see this clock and it's ticking, and there's no going backwards. The time keeps moving forward. So if I miss a certain amount of training or hours or whatever, then I don't get that back. So I have to maximize what I have. And for me it makes sense, but for someone else, whether in the sport or not, it looks crazy, because it's like, well, when do you actually relax? Like, it's hard to try to plan in relaxing when there's this looming like um thing at the end of the tunnel where you're trying to get to, because you want to make sure you maximize everything, but at some point you do have to relax a little bit, but it's a balancing act for sure.
So is 2026, is it all or nothing, boom or bust? That is the goal, to make the Olympic team. And how does that work for Team USA in order to make it?
Yeah, I would like to say that I've fully committed to making this happen. Like I don't want to just go to the games. I want to try to fight for a medal. And I do believe that the strategy I have in mind in a perfect world it would make sense that it would yield a fighting chance at that. Obviously, the reality is things happen. So I try to be adaptable with my plans. I try to be adaptable to who I'm working with. But ultimately, that is the goal. And up to this point right now, I think understanding that, you know, obviously things can happen, but we're gonna fight to the end and push towards that goal. But at the same time, I do recognize my other goals beyond that, the 2030. And there's that glimmer of 2034 in Salt Lake, and I'm just like, I, I don't know, like it's so far away seeming, but it's a home Olympics, so it's kind of like, man, like, do you do you dare to think that far ahead, or do you just stick to the quad and kind of work your way through? So I think making it bite-sized and manageable makes it a lot more tolerable, just because you can really focus on what you're trying to do. You don't get too far ahead of yourself. But it does take some time to balance it out, because sometimes you start to drift your thoughts and it gets overwhelming. So I try to keep that in check as much as I can.
So in a sport like bobsled and skeleton, there isn't so much of a body clock ticking like in some sports, like track and field. Is like, okay, well, you get to a certain age, you can pretty much consider that a wrap. Although there have been Olympians who have defied age in sports like swimming. Uh, so from the sound of what you're telling me is that in your instance, there's like an 8-year window, perhaps, if not longer.
Yeah, if you, it's kind of tough because I think what takes people out of sport sooner than anything else is it's not quite FOMO, but it is a little bit. So some people who start a lot younger, like in the teen years, their life, half their life could be in the sport, and it's like you want something outside of that. You want to pursue your education, you want to start your career, you want to start a family. Other people who are coming to sport later, like, do I want to spend and commit 8 to 12 years, while I'm in my mid late 20s, and then when I come out, I'll be like in my 40s. So it's kind of one of those things where how much am I willing to give? And I think for me, I've always wanted to be an athlete, and I thought track and field would be that route for me. And I might show up for a master's race, who knows, in the future. But right now, I just see this is like this is my baby. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to nurture and take care of and see how far I can push it. But we've seen people who stick around into the 40s. And the thing about our sport is it's so skill based that the more experience you have, the better your knowledge is, and potentially passing down to the next generation. But also, just as an athlete, it's more, can your body handle it? You're going under a lot of G-force pressure, you're experiencing a lot of stressors and travel and a lot of things that are very taxing to the body. So if the FOMO of life going on doesn't take you out, sometimes the body will, just because it's so much strain on the body for so long. So I think that's when you have to get realistic about how do you train and make sure you maximize effectively versus just working it to the bone, and just wear yourself out too quickly.
And you're in Charlotte doing some training, that type of thing at the U.S. Training camp. Uh, I had no idea that such a thing existed, because when we last talked, you were working out at Queens, and it was fairly informal, but obviously things have changed. Talk a little bit about being back in Charlotte and training in a city where you're very familiar. You went to school here and all the other things. Uh, what is that like for you? Do people, do they recognize you in the streets, or can you just walk over to the square and it's like, oh, there she is, or that's just some random person. You just blend right on in with the rest of us.
Mm. So yeah, last time we talked, I was fighting in the development circuit, so I was still trying to build my way up. And within the past few years, honestly, last year is when the big announcement came out of this partnership from the USABS, USA Boston Skeleton Federation, with US Performance Center, that's based off of the UNC's Charlotte campus. And it's been a really cool collab where we come in and for camps, and we can use their gym, we can use their facilities, but it's also a good recruitment hub for future prospects. So it makes it a little bit more feasible to have people come into Charlotte versus going all the way to Lake Placid. And it's logistically, it's kind of tough. It's not the easiest place to get to. So I think longevity wise, it's really good for the lifespan of our sport. It's just for more accessibility to people, just to even try it or consider it, because they're going to build a push track here as well on rails. But for me, like on campus, some of the professors that have been around, they do recognize me, and I'll chat with them a little bit, but I haven't quite reached the status of being recognized in the street yet. Um, maybe after the games we'll see what happens. But no, like I kind of blend in right now. I keep a pretty chill profile. Sometimes I'll have people bump into me like, oh, I saw you on Instagram, and those are cool moments to kind of talk about my journey, but not quite that status yet to be recognized from afar. But we're working towards it.
Yeah. Well, maybe the World Cup medal will do something for that, just to flex it a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, what advice would you give, whether it's kids or people who may have already gone as far as they're going to go with the sport and they still have that itch? What would you tell them if you're putting on your recruiting hat? What would you tell them about sledding and skeleton to say, come on over and try this?
Um, I would say like scratch the itch. You never know what's gonna happen. A lot of the times, just like me, like track and field, you don't really think of that as a translating directly to sliding sports, but um, honestly, people don't know things they don't know. So until you actually see it and you kind of like, oh, I've done that as a kid before. It was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. Like you never know until you try. And honestly, I didn't know about sliding sports until I saw the 2010 Olympics on TV, and I was cheering for the wrong nation. Apparently, I was rooting for the Germans. I didn't know we had a team. And that's the first time I saw Holcomb sliding, and he won the medal there, and it was just like, oh, okay, that's really cool. And I kind of forgot about it, and then eventually time unfolded, and I got brought back to the sliding world, and that's the connection I never would have called from the beginning. So honestly, if there's an opportunity to try something, whether it's something you always wanted to and just kept pushing off, or something you just never even considered, go for it. Like I never heard of pickleball is trending hard right now, and it's a fun sport that's so accessible and anyone can do it. And I think it's just one of those things where like you honestly just got to give it a shot and just see if you like it, if it clicks, or even if it's just a one-time life experience. I would definitely recommend just going for it no matter what it is.
Yeah, but sliding on ice at 75 miles an hour, that's way different than pickleball.
No, I know. We do take you from lower. If you want to go, you'll go about 35, 40. So you can go from halfway up the
Oh,
track.
no, that's the senior speed.
It's not bad.
Okay, that's good to know. It's still pretty quick being that close to the razor's edge, but I'll take your word for it. But Mystic, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me a little bit about where you've been over the past few years. Obviously, you've grown tremendously as an athlete, and as a person, you are handling your business, and that's to be applauded. So there
Thank
you
you.
go.
Thank you.
And best of success. Let's stay in touch.
Oh, for sure. So there's like a world championships in Lake Placid. So, if you're interested, come up and visit. Or I'll definitely be back in Charlotte next year for sure. And I'll keep you posted with my season, how it's going.
I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.